I really am here. What's up? Happy Friday. Thank you guys for being here with us for our next in our series on the 12 disciples. So happy Friday to you, and glad you could join us and be here and be a part of it. So we're going to continue on. We got James today. So let's start, as always, with what we're thankful for. I see Luke checking in, is thankful for food. I like that. I'm just thankful. I'm thankful for my friend Brett and for his heart for the gospel and wanting to share that in other parts of the world, and got to spend some time with him today. So really, really thankful for him. So let me know what you are thankful for today. Looks like I got some incoming here. Alec is thankful for his mom, and Eric is thankful for Cheerios. So yeah, I like both of those too. So thank you guys. All right, so let's do our quarter team game. So last time we had 2 quarters on the line. We talked about how Wednesday was video game day, one of those weird holidays. And so we talked about, okay, when did Pong, that old school video game, come out? So we talked about the arcade one. That one came out in 1972. The in-home one came out in 75. So our closest guesses for those, Eric had guessed 76 for the arcade, so that was closest. Eric gets one and Alec gets one. He was closest with a guess of 1978 for that home. So good job to twins, and thank you guys for checking in on that. So for today, July the 10th, is Independence Day in the Bahamas, which I'm sure you probably already knew, maybe not. So the Bahamas is made up of about 700 islands. I had no idea there was that many. Your question for today, how many of those islands are inhabited by people? Okay, so you got about 700 islands in the Bahamas. How many of those are inhabited by people? So let me know your guesses in the chat, in the comments, whatever. And closest guess gets a quarter. So that's it for that. All right, so let's talk about James. And we talked last time about his brother John. So James is actually John's older brother, like we've seen in all the ones we've done so far. So James and John were friends and business partners with Peter and Andrew. We often see the 4 of them together. We especially see Peter, James, and John together in sort of that close inner circle with Jesus. So we know that about him. He and John were sons of a man named Zebedee, and their mom's name was Salome, pretty wealthy family. And so we know that about them. We know that these brothers were known as the sons of thunder, which we'll come back to in a second. That's what Jesus called them. And we also know, we'll come back to this too, James was the first of the disciples to be killed, to be martyred for the faith. So those are some things we know about him. But what about his personality? What about his character, and what lessons can we learn from him? So again, he and John were both known as the sons of thunder. And actually, interestingly, there's nothing in the 4 Gospels about James that's only about James. In the 4 Gospels, anytime we see James mentioned, it's either with the group as a whole, or with Peter, James, and John, or just James and John. There's nothing about him individually. So we see him a lot with his brother and together, and we see them as, like I said, those sons of thunder, which sort of gives a little look into their personality. He's cocky, he's brash, he's got this selfish ambition. He wants to be first, he wants to be best, he wants to be the leader. All of those sorts of things. It's push, but it's this selfish ambition. We see that in a couple of different stories. One, he and John convinced their mom to go to Jesus and say, "Hey, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, I would really like it if James and John could sit on your right hand and your left hand in those thrones that are closest to you." They misunderstood what Jesus' kingdom was about, but they were trying to push themselves to the forefront ahead of the other disciples, and the other disciples did not care for that at all. But we can sort of see their personality coming through in that. The other story that I really want to talk about today, it's a story in Luke chapter 9 where Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, knowing that he's going there for the final Passover and the crucifixion. They're going to pass through Samaria, which is not the route that most Jews took. They usually avoided Samaria, and they're coming into this village hoping to be able to stay the night there and get some hospitality. And they are rejected. They are told, you cannot stay here. We're not going to do this, which was not necessarily shocking, but the disciples were not happy about it. And James and John are like, hey, Jesus, how about, can you just let us command fire to come down from heaven and consume these people? So on one hand, it's like, this seems like a major overreaction here. There's actually a connection between that and something that happened in the Old Testament with Elijah, who did something similar in the same area. So maybe they thought they were going to kind of be like Elijah. I mean, on one hand, maybe there's a little bit of, I don't know, honor or something admirable about the fact that they wanted to sort of defend Jesus's honor and stick up for him. But I mean, for one thing, they went way overboard. And number two, they just, it wasn't the right way to do it, right? There's an arrogance in the way that James and John approach this of, Jesus, do you want us to command fire? Like, dude, you don't have the right, the authority, the power to command fire from heaven. You don't have that kind of power. Back up, chill out. You don't get to do that. But the other thing is they really miss the point of what Jesus's kingdom was about and what Jesus came to do. He came to save, not to destroy, right? They got offended. It was their own selfish desire and craving for power that wanted to be able to do that. It wasn't ultimately out of love or righteousness that they were doing that. But they were missing the point of what Jesus was really all about. So obviously Jesus said no, that didn't happen. So what can we learn about James from this, and what can we see for ourselves from this? Okay, I mean, a couple of things. One, we see this zeal in James, which can be good, but zeal without wisdom is a dangerous thing. And we definitely see that in James. Now, like with a lot of the disciples, that sort of gets better as they get older, they get wiser, they're trained and built up and transformed by Jesus. And we can see that in James's life. We see early James is this zeal without wisdom, and it's a dangerous thing. But as he gets older and has been changed by Jesus, we see that changed, where this is now not just wild, untamed passion, but this is passion under control. This is passion under the control of the Holy Spirit, which is a very useful and powerful thing. So there's nothing wrong with being passionate, but we've got to make sure that we're using that passion under the control of the Holy Spirit to be able to positively, in love and righteousness and justice, impact the people around us. In the end, James was still a passionate person, but he was passionate for Jesus. He was passionate for the gospel, not just passionate for himself. And that's where the real power came in. And I think we see that passion playing out all the way to the end, because we see in Acts chapter 12, Herod had decided, I've kind of had enough of this Christianity thing. I'm going to do some persecuting of Christians. And the first person he went for was James, which, I mean, kind of tells me that there had to be a reason why James was the first target. And so it's interesting to me that this guy who always wanted to be first, he always wanted to be out in front, in the end, he kind of gets that, but he gets to be the first who is martyred for his faith. And he was willing to accept that cup of suffering because his passion was for Jesus and not for himself anymore. So I hope that that's something that that we can model after, that we can imitate and be passionate, but passionate for Jesus. So that's it for James. Next time on Monday, we'll talk about Philip. That'll be our next one. So I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. Hopefully we'll get to see you on Sunday morning. Don't forget about quarter team game question. How many islands of the Bahamas are inhabited? That's it for today. I love you guys. We'll see you later.